Are you still getting frizz even though you've tried so many products? Well, it might not be your products, it might be how you're applying them. My name is Gina and welcome back to my channel. Here we talk all things naturally curly. I love simplifying things and helping you problem solve with your curls. And I'm also a curl coach who helps my clients better understand how to properly apply their products. This video is inspired by all of the things that I have caught my clients doing after watching them style. I have watched so many people style and I've picked up on those little subtle details that most of you might not even notice that make a big difference in how your curls turn out. And it's when they make those small little tweaks that they finally get the results that they want that also last. So today I'm gonna walk you through a step-by-step styling routine and show you the exact way that I put on my products to maximize my hold and longevity. Let's get started. Before we get started with styling, the first step is to prep the hair. You don't want to go right in and style your hair with the way my hair looks right now. This is my hair starting to air dry after I got out of the shower. This is way too dry to apply your products, and it's also a little bit tangly. So what we need to do first is wet down our hair with a spray bottle. You want your hair to be evenly wet. This prep step is really important, especially if you're someone who struggles with sectioning your hair, if you have a hard time getting your products applied evenly. See how much wet frizz that I have when I don't do this step. After you wet your hair down, take your hands and run your hands through your hair or just use a brush. As long as your hair is already detangled from the shower, you can totally use a brush. Just be gentle and just look at the difference that it makes. We need to get a smooth base without a bunch of wet frizz before we apply our products, especially if you're going to go straight to a gel. That's really important for an even application. If you're seeing patchy areas of frizz where it's starting to dry or frizz up, your hair is not wet enough and it hasn't been smoothed out. And don't worry about losing your curl pattern by smoothing out. We're going to fix that later. Right now, we're just focusing on getting that smooth base to start to apply our products. So I'm going to go ahead and mist my hair down on the other side with my spray bottle. I'll link my tools down below. Then I just take my hands and lift my hair off my scalp. This makes sectioning so much easier. And just look at the difference in my hair when I do the right prep steps. Then I'm going in with my Curlsmith Miracle Shield. Now, another key thing is you don't want to apply your spray products just by spraying your hair. It ended up going all over my wall. You can barely see here on camera, but there are dots all over my wall that stained my wall. And it also goes all over the floor. So if you're using a spray product like the Curlsmith Miracle Shield, I highly recommend applying it to your palm first, then rub it together in your hand. You don't want to go right in with this big blob of product either. Rub it together so that way your hands are evenly coated and then start raking it in. But when you rake it in, you want to make sure that you start with the area that's the most damaged, that needs it the most, because that product is going to stick first to where you first touch your hair. So that's why you usually see me start in the front pieces on my ends because that's where I have the most damage. Then I usually brush it through to make sure that it is evenly distributed. These are the tiny little overlooked steps that I always pick up on my clients doing that make a big difference. If you've been using a heat protectant but you're still experiencing damage, it's likely that you're just not getting an even application. You have to think about every strand of hair getting covered in that heat protectant. If you're just going in on the surface or maybe you're just kind of rubbing it on the top, it's not getting down to all of your hairs. It's impossible, obviously, to fully cover every strand of hair, but we can at least try by brushing it through, then running your hands through your hair to lift it off your scalp again. The next step is a bonus step, but I'm also going in with the Marc Anthony Strictly Curls NB Cream. But what you don't want to do is just go right on with a blob of product. You need to rub that product between your palms, evenly coat your hands in it, and also make sure that your hands are wet. If you saw I did spray my hands down with water, that's to help emulsify the product. You want it to be coated on all of your hands, then go in with the same concept as the heat protectant. Start where you need the most product. For me, my ends are dry and the front pieces, so that's why you usually see me start there when I'm raking in my product. If you're somebody who has fine hair or overly soft hair, or if you really want to maximize hold, I would skip the curl cream step. There's no need for both a heat protectant spray and a curl cream if you already have enough moisture from just your heat protectant, so totally skip this. But I personally needed a little bit more conditioning this time of year, which is why I went in with the curl cream. You also want to add some more water as you go, especially if your hair starts to dry. My hair dries really quickly, so I'm always picking up my spray bottle as I'm raking my product through, because if your hair is starting to dry, you're not going to be able to apply the product evenly. It's just going to stick to certain areas. Then I always make sure to run my hands through my hair to lift it off my scalp to be able to section next. I just want to show you why I section my hair. If you take your gel and you just go right in and scrunch your hair like this, look at how I'm only touching the surface area of my hair. That gel is only touching a couple of the hairs on the front, maybe my ends. Even if you spend a lot of time scrunching, look at how much frizz still shows up on the inner layers of my hair. When you're just scrunching, you're just pulling out those little hairs from their curl clumps, especially if you're just scrunching on the surface like this, which is what I see a lot of people do. So see how much wet frizz that I have and how much frizz is now sticking out. This is why I section, because it gets your products applied evenly. And you don't have to do a ton of sections either. You can still style your hair quickly, but use sections. Now, here's how I section my hair very easily and quickly. We had our hair prepped beforehand, which is key. It's not stuck to the scalp, it's not brushed down, it's not starting to dry. You want your hair to be wet if you want to section evenly. Then I'm just placing my fingers right around my temple area. You can choose where you want to section depending on your hair's density, but this is where I like to section my hair. And then I'm just creating my section lines. You want to keep these as clean as possible. I have a full video actually on how to section your hair properly that goes into depth about how I get the best section. So make sure you watch that if you haven't already seen it. I'll put it linked for you below. Your section lines don't need to be perfect, but I do recommend making sure that there's not hairs that are crossed over and looped around. I'm also re-wetting the lower section because my hair is already starting to dry and we want it to be evenly wet. Now it's time for my main styling product, which is the Marc Anthony Strictly Curls Flex Gel. This is a medium hold gel, but the way I apply it is what really maximizes the hold. A common mistake I often see is people go in with a huge glob of gel, like their entire amount for that section, and they put it right on their hair. That's what you don't want to do because you're going to have a hard time spreading that around. I mean, you can if you really spend time working that through, but it's just a little bit harder. So instead, I take a smaller amount to start, rub that between my palms and make sure it's all between my fingertips. That way when I'm raking, I'm getting it into my hair. Then I start raking it through my hair. I also like to make sure that my hands are wet because that's going to help the gel spread better, especially if you're using a gel that's very thick. So those thick, stickier gels, you really want to add water to those. Then I just gradually start raking and I'm working my way around my head. You'll notice that I often pick up a little bit more gel as I go. So I'm constantly paying attention to the way that my hair feels. And if I don't feel that gel in my hair anymore, that's when I pick up more. You want to feel that slippery, slimy feeling, or even if your gel doesn't have slip, you should still be able to feel that gel in your hair. And if you don't, you need to pick up more gel. It's way easier to start small and add more as you go than to go in with a big blob all at once. I also want to show you the way that I'm raking because you'd be surprised how much of a difference that this makes. I'm using my hands almost like a claw, sort of like a brush or a comb, and I'm also applying tension as I rake. I'm squeezing the hair as I rake. I'm not pulling out my hair or anything. You're gonna have some shedding, which is completely natural. I'm not tugging on it too hard. I'm just being gentle, but I am thoroughly raking it. Another little subtle mistake that I often notice that makes a big difference is when people are raking, they often don't follow all the way through the strand. If you're in a hurry, you might notice that as you're raking, you're really only touching the midsection of the hair strand because you're lifting off the hair before you follow all the way through. And this can lead to your ends not really getting very coated in gel, which can lead to them being very frizzy. If your ends dry frizzy, this might be why. So instead, when you're raking, make sure that you are following all the way through the strand of hair to where the hair drops out of your hand when you make a pass with your raking. That ensures that you fully coat the ends of your hair. Make sure you're fully following through. You can also do the praying hands technique, which is a great way to really smush the gel onto your ends of hair. And then you can also pick up a brush, which is a super easy and fast way to just evenly distribute your product. Even if you don't do a bunch of fancy brush styling, just use your brush to distribute your product and you'll notice a big difference. And again, don't worry about your hair stretching out, especially if you have waves and loose curls. I know what you're thinking. All of these techniques are just going to stretch out my hair. We're going to scrunch and bring the curls back in just a minute, but it's important to get everything fully coated first, then we'll bring the curls back. Just stay tuned for that. And in fact, I actually recommend scrunching each section as you go. This was another big takeaway that I noticed after watching a lot of my clients style is they would brush style, drop the hair, and then move on to the next section. If you have waves and loose curls, it's especially important to stop and scrunch each section because when your hair is in sections, you're able to actually scrunch all the way up to the root. And I can can show you the difference that it makes in my hair. Even when I just scrunch each section, it definitely helps. You can wet your hands when you're doing this. You just don't want your hands to be sticky. You can also apply a little bit of gel to your hands when you're scrunching. Just make sure, again, your hands are not sticky when you're going around and scrunching. Now I'm moving on to my middle section of hair, and you'll see the amount of gel that I pick up. This is the correct amount for me to start with. You can see it's pretty small. I'm also wetting my hands because it's going to be hard to apply your gel if your hands are dry and sticky. Rubbing that gel all over my palms, then I'm going in and raking where I need it the most, which actually for me, the frizziest part is around my hairline and around the roots on this area. So I start there when I'm raking, but I still make sure that I follow through the strand fully. You can see the hair kind of drop out of my hands as I'm raking. I felt that I needed more gel. That little bit was not going to go all the way around my head, so I picked up a little bit more. After I rake in my products evenly, I'm just taking my brush and brushing lightly from underneath. Again, I'm not doing anything crazy, just making sure that my product is evenly applied. After I finish styling a section, I like to take my clip down and then scrunch again, but scrunch the two sections together. Look at the difference that scrunching makes. So those of you who are worried about evenly applying your products and stretching out your curls, see how much of a difference it makes when you scrunch each section. So now I'm just going and scrunching that other side to get it to shrink up to its natural curl pattern. So this gives us the best of both worlds. We've got our products applied evenly and we're enhancing our curls. Now moving on to the back half of my top section, I like to section this into two because it's just too much hair to work with doing the entire top section at once. Plus I like to style my back section up and back to cover my scalp. The top section is where I do a little bit more styling. I spend a little bit more time precisely styling this area just so it lasts longer. But you might notice that I like to get my products evenly applied, then I style or do any kind of styling techniques. If you define your hair first, so if you like brush styled or finger coiled, then you try and apply your product, that's just going to lock in an uneven application. And that's where random frizz patches come from. You might see frizz from underneath. And I often find that when clients do this the opposite way, they end up having to restyle a second time, which wastes so much time and energy. So you want to apply your products first, then style, then scrunch, because scrunching locks everything into place. You don't want to scrunch and style and then try and get your gel applied. It's not going to go on evenly. After you get done styling, you can't forget the scrunching step. I also like to add water to my hands because you don't want your hands to be sticking to your hair. And the water is what's really going to help spring up your curls and waves. So at this step, that's usually when I'm scrunching in a little bit more water, really trying to get my curls defined. I do a little bit of praying hands too, just to kind of blend my sections together and also fix any stubborn stringiness, but you could skip that step. I just make sure that I always scrunch after praying hands because it obviously stretches out the curl, but scrunching brings it right back. The next step is to microplop, and this is optional. If you feel like your hair is already starting to dry or you don't want to cause frizz, you can totally skip this. But if you want to speed up your dry time, especially if you styled soaking wet, you do need to remove that water first with your hair towel. You can wet your hair towel a little bit if you don't want it to soak up too much product. That's just a little tip that can really help. And then I'm just going around and gently scrunching. This is my hair repair towel, by the way. It's super helpful, but you can always just use a t-shirt if that's all you have. But you might notice that you get just a little bit of frizz from scrunching with your towel, and that's okay, we can fix it. And in fact, you might also notice that you get even more hold when you go in with the second extra coat of gel. This makes a big difference, especially when you're using gels like that have a medium hold or a lighter hold. And I'm just using a little bit. I mix it with some water just so it's not too much gel. Then I go around and just smooth over the hair. But look closely, I'm just smoothing, I'm not disturbing the curl clumps we already created. If your hair is very loose curls and waves, you can skip the praying hands technique if you want and just focus on kind of glazing over the surface and scrunching. I'm able to still do praying hands, and in fact, it helps me really lock in frizz on my ends. But as you can see, my curls came right back. Everything is smoothed out. I don't see any wet frizz. Everything's applied very evenly, which is key because you need to get that frizz tamed before you start diffusing. A lot of people often ask me, like, what is the point in microplopping and then adding more gel? Like, isn't it just repetitive? But just trust the process. It makes a big difference because then you can still style with a lot of water for clumps. You can remove that water to cut down on your dry time, and then you can increase your hold by adding that extra gel. The next step is to diffuse, which I highly recommend over air drying, especially if you're struggling with frizz, but you want to make sure that you're diffusing properly. If not, it will cause frizz. So I usually start by hovering first and kind of holding my hair up a little bit just so it doesn't elongate. Then I go in and scrunch diffuse. Scrunch diffusing is essential if you want to really shrink up your curls. I'm using the Curlsmith hairdryer with the XXL diffuser attachment, which I highly recommend because I'm able to dry my hair in about 10 minutes because of how large this diffuser head is. Whenever I air dry over diffusing, I always end up with a ton of frizz. It looks very stringy. It just doesn't set right. So the diffuser helps me just set everything immediately before frizz can even form. If you start touching your hair a lot when you're diffusing, or if you're moving it around too much, that really starts to break up the cast before it can set. And this can lead to a lot of frizz, even if your application was perfect. Once my hair is fully dry, that's when I go in and fluff and scrunch out the cast. If you're really struggling with your frizz, you might want to skip this last step, but most of us don't like that crunchy, wet look, so we choose to scrunch out the cast. But you could always leave some of the cast in areas that tend to frizz up. So for me, that's the front pieces and the ends that I mentioned before. So I usually leave a little bit of the cast in that area. I also like to fluff and just shake out my roots from underneath to get good volume. And these are my final results. You can see I have a little bit of cast around my front pieces, but that's going to soften up on its own throughout the day and into day 2. But these results will last me several days without refreshing. Everything's nice and defined. Just a reminder, our hair is not going to be completely frizz-free. We cannot expect that. But if you adjust your styling technique and your product application, you will be amazed at how much better your hair looks. It's often not your products, it's often the way that you're applying them. If you do want to tame a little bit of frizz that you see after you've broken your cast, I just wanted to show you this tip because it can really help with gels that are lighter or a medium hold. I always get some frizz when I'm using these types of gels, even with the best application, but this step makes a big difference. So I'll go in with just a little bit of gel. I always mix in water because I don't want to apply a lot. I just need a little bit, so I do dilute it. And then I rub it between my palms, and then I just pick up the piece that's frizzy and apply a little bit more gel. So I just smooth over it, almost like I do when I'm refreshing. So see how that just smooths the frizz down? This area for me has a lot of stubborn frizz, same with my ends. So just smoothing over it or kind of finger coiling makes a big difference. So a lot of times those frizzy patches just get progressively worse throughout the day and into day 2. So I find that if I fix them now, my hair lasts so much longer to where I don't even need to refresh. So taking that extra step makes a big difference. And I use it also to tame any flyaways on top. So again, it's not going to be completely frizz-free, but you can see that made a big difference and it will make my hair last a lot longer. If you've tried all of these application tips that I shared with you today and you're still getting frizz, there's a couple of questions that you should ask yourself to help troubleshoot. The first one being, did you apply enough gel or whichever styling product that you're using? So if you've already determined that you have a gel that's actually strong enough hold and you applied it very thoroughly and you're still getting frizz, did you use enough gel? Sometimes we need more than we think, especially when we're using lighter hold gels or gels that have more of a flexible feel. Did you apply some sort of leave-in conditioner or a curl cream underneath that reduced its hold? I only used one today because my hair is feeling dry this time of year and I like this combo together. But for the most part, I usually recommend using gels on their own, especially if your hair gets weighed down easily, if it's a very soft finish, or if you have fine textured hair, definitely use your gel by itself. At least for one wash day, use nothing underneath to see if you get more hold, and I bet you do. So if you answered no to any of these questions and you're still getting frizz, then you might want to look at the actual gel that you're using. However, it's important to note that there are a dozen things that contribute to frizz in our hair, and there are just so many variables. Everything from your diffusing technique, conditioning and hold imbalance, the wrong ratio of water to gel. These are the exact things that I help my curl coaching clients troubleshoot. In our troubleshooting lessons, we always start by talking about what is normal versus what is not normal, because sometimes we just have unrealistic expectations about our hair, such as wanting our hair to be frizz-free, which is never going to be the case. But we have to be able to figure out what is just normal frizz and what is frizz that is from making one of these common mistakes or something that you can control. Then I walk my clients through a flow chart that helps them pinpoint exactly when the frizz is happening. And after, we're able to isolate the cause of the frizz and work together to try and minimize it. My goal is to give my clients the tools to be self-sufficient and be able to troubleshoot on their own. And as I mentioned here today, slowing down and really paying attention to how and where you're applying your styling products can add a little bit of time to your wash day at first until you get the hang of it, and then it becomes second nature. And in fact, my clients find that these techniques actually save them time because the results last a lot longer. If you want help with pinpointing your cause of frizz or why your curls aren't lasting or whatever problem you're facing, I would love to help you inside my curl coaching membership, which is reopening for enrollment for our winter program now. I'll review your routine, I'll watch you style, diffuse, refresh, and much more, and give you those tweaks that you can make to get the results that you want. And my goal is never to complicate things. We keep things very simple. And in fact, most of my clients find that I have made their routine shorter and faster. So to discuss if you're a fit, just send me an email with the word group, or you can send me a DM on Instagram or Facebook with the word group, and we'll talk about your goals and decide if you're a fit. If you want more help with how to properly apply your products and to not use too much product or make sure that you're using enough, check out the recent video that I did. I will link it for you right here on the screen. It's all about if you're using the wrong amount of product, and I do a side-by-side split test, one side using way too much product and one side using not enough, so you can see those differences. And I even show you what the right amount of product looks like based on my hair type, my goals, and the products that I use. So I hope you find that video helpful, and I will talk to you over there. Bye, everyone.